Hey guys, in this video we're going to be doing the Nax Rogue PvE Prio. I'll be doing a PvP video in a couple of days, so keep an eye out for that. And just let's get right into this video. The main goal here is to focus on items that are going to increase your character the most, items that are the hardest to replace, items that are going to have the most competition, and not prioritize items that are going to be easy pickups or that are easily replaceable. So those are the goals. And also, I want you to take away from the video like certain items that you might want to steer clear of or might be overrated that might end up costing you when you're filling out your loot sheet for Nax, or if you're in a loot council guild and you're telling your class leader or whatever what items you want, or even if you're in a DKP guild and you have to spend DKP on gear that drops. So that's the goal of the video. Let's get into it. Let's start with the best items in the game. First of all, we have Gressel. Now, the funny thing about Gressel is when you look at it, it actually really is not that good when you're looking at like raid stats. The reason it's so good is because there's nothing else, right? Its speed is not even 2.8. It's a downgrade in speed over Karaji Ripper. The stats are worse. The 40 AP is not amazing stats for this stage in the game for a raiding weapon. But the DPS is really high, and there's nothing better. The second best item is Karaji Ripper, 15 less DPS, and that's how you end up, Gressel being as important as it is. So it's, in my opinion, like the most important item in the raid for a rogue. It's really irreplaceable, and it's really important that if you're a sword rogue, it's really important to know that this is the best item in the raid, that this is what you want. And if you're not getting this, you need to be getting other things to compensate. And as we go through, I'll kind of explain why something like Hungry and Cold might look like it's, almost as good as getting Gressel, right? Like, why not just take that one instead? I'll explain as we're going through why Gressel is going to dwarf pretty much everything else in here. And it's going to come down to the fact that Gressel is not replaceable. There is no other Nax sword that you can put in your main hand that is going to be close. You've got Gressel, and that's the end of the day. The second best item, like I said, comes from AQ and is, way worse. So Gressel is just in a league of its own, and your number one priority by a mile if you are a sword rogue. Next, we've got King's Fall. Now, King's Fall is actually the exact opposite of Gressel when I explained why it's good. And when we were talking about Gressel, we were mentioning like it's irreplaceable, like there's nothing close. That's actually not the case. And for daggers, in Nax, you've got Harbinger of Doom, you've got Myaxin's Fang. There's two amazing daggers in AQ with Death Sting and Pugio. So there's actually a lot of really good daggers from the last two raids in Classic. The thing that makes King's Fall so good is just that it has ridiculous stats. Right, the stats are like basically twice as good as Gressel in terms of raid damage. Ridiculous stats, just good speed. The weapon is just very good because of its stats and its DPS. Pretty simple, very good. Best item for a dagger rogue to shoot for, and despite the fact that Gressel is so irreplaceable, King's Fall is still in the same tier as it, simply because of how good the stats are. All right, well, those are the best items in the game. Let's start going down the list. Now we have the best in slot offhands, and you're going to notice there's no dagger here. And the reason there's no dagger is because your best in slot offhand dagger for raiding is going to be Death Sting from AQ. So that's why there's no dagger here. Now let's get into Hungry and Cold. Now Hungry and Cold is going to be best in slot if you are not a human. And you slot it in over Maladeth. +6 swords versus +4 doesn't really do much. You don't really need the extra +2 swords. The main difference is going to be that Hungry and Cold is much faster, which means you get more sword spec procs and you get more poison procs if you're using poison. And obviously the DPS is much higher. So that is why you'd be using Hungry and Cold as an upgrade. Now, one thing I really want to mention is if you're looking at a spreadsheet or you're looking at sims, it's going to show that Hunger and Cold over Maladeth is actually close to Gressel over AQR. And you might say, well, hey, maybe I want to snag Hungering Cold since everybody, other rogues in my guild are looking at Gressel. Maybe I'll just take Hungering Cold since it's close, right? And again, this is where I bring up the replaceability argument. Hungering Cold is a very big upgrade over Maladeth. And it even is a big upgrade over Iblis. But because Iblis exists, it all of a sudden, reduces the value of Hungering Cold. And what I mean by that is there is an alternative that you can get that like lessens the gap between the best offhand and the second best offhand. Whereas again, Gressel is, a huge jump between AQR. Also things to mention about Hungering Cold. Outside of raid, like if you are not attacking a raid boss, this even includes when you're fighting trash and stuff, Iblis is actually going to be better in any situation where you're not fighting a skull enemy or a level 63 enemy because of how weapon skill works. So that's another reason why you might take down the value of Hungering Cold a little bit. It's not even going to be best in slot against raid trash if you care about trash damage. And, ultimately, once you got all your raid gear, if, whatever you do, if you PvP, you do dungeons, whatever you're doing, Hungering Cold is not the best. And it's, obviously not bad, terrible or anything, because it does do so much damage. It's really just raiding that you're going to be looking for that sword skill. And that is why Hungering Cold for me is a tier below Gressel while still being really good, while still being best in slot. Now let's talk about Iblis. Now I was mentioning Iblis there. I do not think Iblis is in the same tier as Hungering Cold if you're a Horde player. But if you are a human rogue on the Alliance side, Iblis is going to be your best in slot offhand. Again, it's not going to be as good as Gressel, but hey, it's best in slot. It's a big upgrade over like Brutality Blade, or if you have a CTS in your offhand or a ZG sword, whatever you've got, Iblis is going to be a sizable upgrade over that. And it's going to be your best in slot. So if you're human, value Iblis pretty high. It's going to increase your damage more than a Trinket. However, again, I want to be clear, this is just for humans. Horde we'll talk about a little bit later. Next, let's go to the Trinkets. You got Kiss the Spider, you got Slayer's Crest. Kiss the Spider is, one of the best items in, again, we're following the tiers, right? One of the best items in the raid. If we're not talking about a weapon, it's going to be like the biggest DPS upgrade for you, as long as you're not, like, you don't have some really bad weapon, in which case, if you have a very bad weapon, maybe one of these stepping stone weapons could actually end up being a bigger upgrade. But besides that, these Trinkets are going to be your next best upgrade. They're very good. Kiss of the Spider is better. Kiss of the Spider is also generally more wanted by warriors. So you're going to have to figure out within your guild what they're doing, how they're splitting these. But just keep in mind that Kiss of the Spider is better than Slayer's Crest. And so if you're going to pick one for raiding, I would recommend going for Kiss the Spider if you have the option. And, if someone else is getting Slayer's Crest or someone else is getting Kiss and you're getting Slayer's Crest, just know that Kiss is better. And so I would be like, hey, that guy gets Kiss, I get Crest. I'm going to ask for, something. I want to be higher on some lower or mid tier item to compensate, something like that. So that's Trinkets. Now on to mid tier. Now these items are not BIS. Not a single one of these items is BIS, again, because we're talking about Iblis for Horde right now. They're all temporary weapons. Now you have something like Naxxramas Fang, which is going to be really good if you don't have King's Fall, if you don't have, the Death Sting, sorry. But again, the thing with these items that makes them kind of traps, that makes them kind of like something you might want to steer clear from, you need to be very careful when you get these items that you understand the repercussions. So let me give you an example. Like 90% of the time, if you get Naxxramas Fang, you're not getting King's Fall. Unless explicitly stated, right? Generally, my Axonus Fang is going to be going to an individual that is not going to get King's Fall. And the same thing goes for Iblis. I mean, it's the second best weapon behind Hungering Cold for Horde, but I'm not going to be screaming when this drops, begging for it, and then expecting to still get Gressel, right? So it's just very important to know that while these weapons are good and they're upgrades, you just want to be careful because they are not going to be, worth sacrificing a lot for. So, for example, if you have like Death Sting and Pugio, if either of these are dropping, I'm not jumping for joy. I'm not trying to get this item. I'm saying, okay, if no one wants it, I would equip it as an upgrade, but my attention would not be on these items. I would just want to make sure that I am not giving more reasons to not get King's Fall, right? So hopefully that makes sense. Widow's Remorse here, this is for Alliance only. If you're an Alliance player, again, if you're a human rogue, Widow's Remorse is going to be better than, CTS or, the ZG Offhand Sword or Brutality Blade. But again, not best in slot. It's still behind Iblis, and it's behind some other stuff like Thunder Fury, rank 14 swords. So just keep that in mind. Next, I want to comment on Band of Unnatural Forces. Now, you see it in the midst of all these weapons, and you're like, well, what's a ring doing here? I think this ring is actually very good, and it is going to increase your damage less than a lot of these weapons if you have world buffs. But believe it or not, depending on your guild, like in my guild, I'm expecting come Naxxramas, my guild is not going to have world buffs, right? We're going to be dying to bosses. We're not going to be clearing raids in 2 hours. So when I'm looking at items for raid, I have to look at things with a little different lens in Naxxramas. And the fact that Band of Unnatural Forces has so much attack power means that it is very, very good. It's best in slot with ZG buff, right? Now imagine there's no ZG buff. Stuff like Akiria, stuff like the tier 3 ring that are your competition with this ring gets worse. So when you die and lose ZG buff, lose all your world buffs, attack power gets better. Band of Unnatural Forces is actually a bigger increase than Iblis on Horde side if you do not have world buffs, right? That's what I mean. So, and it's best in slot, whereas Iblis is a stepping stone. That's why I put it in this tier. Personally, if I was a Horde sword rogue, because I play daggers, I would want Band of Unnatural Forces over Iblis. And I mean, that might sound crazy, but I just know that the way I am going to be playing, we're going to be dying, we're going to be losing buffs. The ring is going to be better without buffs, a little bit worse with, and then also Iblis is not going to be hurting my Prio on another sword. So that's why I think this ring is actually very good and something to keep an eye on, especially if your guild dies a lot and you're not expecting to have full world buff, speed run, full efficiency, Nax experience. So keep that in mind. But again, I mean, one last gloss through, all of these weapons are better. If you're Alliance, this is better too, than your AQ equivalent, but not best in slot. So my Naxxramas Fang is better than Pugio, not better than Desting. Harbinger better than Pugio. Iblis is better than Maladeth. And Widow's Remorse is going to be better than pretty much anything but Thunder Fury rank 14 if you are a human, going into Nax, but again, not better than Iblis. Next, let's go on to the, lower tier items. You've got Bone Scythe Ring. Now, it's not a huge stat increase, but the reason it's separated from all the other items is you don't actually build the ring with tokens and materials, but it just drops. So keep in mind that the Bone Scythe Ring is the hardest piece of tier to get, simply because you're not going to there's more randomness involved, right? It's just like tier used to be back in phase 1, phase 2, where the boss dies and tier drops. So the ring operates differently than all the other tier. It's going to be a little harder to get, so just keep that in mind. But again, it's not a massive increase. It's really nice in terms of having the set bonuses on the ring, and depending on different things you're trying to pull off, especially if you're a PvP player. I'll talk about this more in the PvP video, but it can be nice to try and activate that 4 set while maintaining a 5 set like Death Dealer, for example. But that's really more of a PvP thing. So I wouldn't worry too much about the ring. Again, it's arguably the most valuable piece of tier simply because of the rarity, but it is not one of the best pieces of tier in terms of how much it improves your character. We also have Mark of the Champion. Every time you kill Kel'Thuzad, you're going to have a quest item just like Head of Onyxia, Head of Nefarian, and so on, and Eye of Cthulhu. If you turn it in, you get a Mark of the Champion. And I selected the spell power one here. It has the same name, Mark of the Champion, but it gives you a boatload of attack power. Basically, the one that you would choose as a rogue. Mark of the Champion is going to be something that you choose if all you care about is raid damage. It's only going to be useful inside of, very restrictive settings, right? It's only undead and demons. I guess you can mention that it's good into TBC because certain raids are going to have a lot of undead and demons, and because it has so much attack power, it is good against them. But it is only going to be applicable in PvE. It's guaranteed every time you kill the boss. So just keep in mind that some people may not even want this. If you want a static trinket, like if you don't have DFT, maybe this would be something you cared about more. And especially if your trinkets suck, you could try going for Mark of the Champion, I guess, a little bit sooner. But personally, I, again, wouldn't want to alter my prio on any of these items just to have a passive AP increase. Next, we have Might of the Scourge. Might of the Scourge permanently increases your crit by 1, and you lose a little bit of AP. It's a shoulder enchant. You're only going to be putting this once you get tier 3 shoulders. So, I don't know. Just don't yoink this and then put it on a replaceable piece of shoulder gear. But yeah, Might of the Scourge, again, you're going to have a couple of these drop every week from Saffron. You're going to get it eventually. I wouldn't be in a huge rush on this one, but it is going to give you a crit. It is going to end up costing you a little bit of AP, though. I wouldn't be rushing to do this. Also, if you're struggling with crit cap, maybe don't waste priority on Might of the Scourge if you're just going to have crit cap issues anyway, which would reduce the value of the crit. So just keep that in mind. All right, now we're on to tier. There's a lot of different pieces of tier that are good in different situations. The gloves, all 5 of these pieces are very good. They're the best 5 pieces of tier. Note that the gloves and the boots, like I mentioned, are going to be really good if you don't have ZG, especially on Horde side. They're going to be really good because of so much pure attack power. Also, the same goes for the chest. You might hear a lot of things about the chest not being very good, being a downgrade on Alliance side, being a tiny upgrade on Horde. Once ZG is eliminated, that kind of goes out the window, and it all of a sudden becomes a pretty decent upgrade. So just keep that in mind. Also, that even though it's not really considered one of the best pieces of tier, if your guild or even your playstyle, you don't get a ZG buff, right? This item is going to be better than expected. Next, one thing I want to mention, the gauntlets are going to be really good, especially if you don't have enforcement. So just keep that in mind that if you haven't gotten enforcement yet, these are going to be a massive increase, but the gloves are really, really good. Lastly, obviously if you're still using, if you're still a dagger dude and you do not have Death Sting, you're not going to replace your aged cord leather gloves with these. So keep that in mind as well. On to the worst pieces of tier. The wrists are best in slot just no matter what, but they're a wrist piece. Wrist gear just has less stats than a piece like legs or chest. So hence it's not a huge upgrade because it's a wrist. Chest, again, like I mentioned, this might not even be an upgrade if you're an Alliance player. You have Death Dealer, you've got ZG buff. It's not going to be an upgrade for you. Don't even use it. But again, if you lose your buffs, if you don't have kings on you, if you're Horde, this is going to be pretty nice, especially with no ZG buff. And then lastly, the belt. If you're Alliance, this is a slight upgrade with full buffs. If you're Horde, this isn't even better than Corrupted Agony, or Never Ending Agony rather, the Cthulhu belt. So if you don't have that yet, you can aim for this one. There's also utility with this belt. Again, if you're trying to do certain 5-set combinations, if you want to do Death Dealer plus Bone Scythe, you could try and pick this up. Rock the 4-set Bone Scythe, 5-set Death Dealer. You need the belt to pull off that combo. So keep that in mind. Next, we're going to get on to PvP items. Now, I know some people are considering getting these items for raid. Feel free to do this if you have like really bad weapons, and that's perfectly fine to use these for PvE. Personally, I would not recommend going for these items if you are at like previous tier level Abyss. If I had Maladeth, I'm not going to take Claw of the Frostworm. It is a very minimal DPS increase. It would be a bigger DPS increase to just get a piece of tier. For the small DPS increase that I would get going from like Maladeth to Claw of the Frostworm, some spreadsheets don't even list it as being a DPS upgrade. So personally, I wouldn't be taking Claw of the Frostworm. I wouldn't be forcing Servo Arms or trying to make that work. There's also another mace I haven't listed here that drops from Thaddeus, I believe. Again, you can snag those up if you have really bad weapons, but don't bother if you already have like previous raid tiers Abyss. Leave these for PvP or use them for PvP or whatever. I personally, unless it's getting disenchanted, I'm not grabbing Claw if I have Maladeth for PvE, right? Other mentions, just don't worry about this stuff for raiding. Really, none of these items matter. Soul String, I guess I could mention Soul String. It is technically better than your bow. It's going to be better than Striker's Mark. It's just as good as the gun from Oro, and it's likely the same situation as the gun from Oro. Most guilds are going to be giving this to warriors, so just expect that to happen. The warriors that don't have the Oro gun are probably going to get this. It's going to be better for them than it'll be a bigger upgrade for a warrior than it is for you with a Striker's Mark. So just keep that in mind that this thing exists, but you're probably not going to get it. Other things to mention, Nerubian Slave Maker is best in slot, but obviously you're going to give that to hunters. The Talisman of Seething is not better than Prester's. Even if you lose all your buffs and everything, Prester's is still just about as good, or even slightly better. So in every situation when you're raiding, you're going to want to use Prester's, especially if you're having trouble with crit cap. So I would just let another class have this, basically probably warrior. And then the cloak, the one thing I will say about the cloak, again, because it has a lot of AP, it's good if you lose ZG, it's good if you lose your buffs. But if you have a cloak from AQ, this is going to be a small increase. It's not that big of a deal. I personally would focus my attention on other pieces of gear. But the cloak is, unlike the other two, which I don't really see a situation where I would try and get them, I could understand going for the cloak. Ultimately, it's up to you. Personally, I would only go for the cloak if I had a lot of trouble getting AQ cloaks. For example, my guild has had one cloak from Scarum, one concentrated hatred cloak, and no Cthulhu cloaks have been made for rogues. So, for example, this might be a situation where a rogue might want this item and might end up in rotation with a warrior or something. But generally speaking, this should probably be going to warrior, as it's going to be better for them. But unless you have like a weird exception case like that, I would generally, have this one go over to warrior. But that's it for the PvE items. I will have a link to this page in the description if you want to follow along. I'll even, edit in that mace I was talking about before from Thaddeus, and I'll tweak this thing out for the AP one. But thanks for watching, guys. Let me know if you have any questions, what you're prioritizing. Again, in conclusion, the goal here is get Gressel. If you're not getting Gressel, you need to get other stuff. So my game plan would be, number one, get Gressel. If I can't get Gressel, I can't get first or second Gressel, then I'm aiming for Hungering Cold if I'm Horde, or Iblis if I'm Alliance. Again, if you can't get the first or second, now we're in territory. If you're not getting any of these first few, like the first or second of either of these items, like you need to get a lot. So I need to be first on a trinket. I need to be high on the ring. I need to be getting a placeholder for whatever weapon. You need to be careful that you don't get bumped too far down without anything. So just go in with the your game plan, whether you're talking to a loot council or a guild or whatever. Keep your eyes on the prize, and if you can't get it, make sure that you're getting a lot of items below it to compensate. And again, don't be wooed by tier gear, guys. Don't be wooed by tier gear. You're gonna get tier eventually, and do not make sacrifices on the best pieces of gear for tier and for items like Might of the Scourge or Mark of the Champion. So again, let me know what you guys think. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you guys soon in the PvP video.